Hello, my name's Leong, and I live and work here in Cripplebush, and I'm the creator for The Falls. We are outside my studio in my yard, and I'm about to take you in. Follow me. Walk this way. This studio used to be a horse stable when we in the 80s they used to farm horses here. You go in first. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about my process and where I find my inspiration from, how I create the work, and then I'm going to show and tell some of my actual work that will be available on Field and Supply. And you're getting a nice little sort of pan of the studio there. That's my shelves of all my old magazines, and that's my favorite object, Bozo the clown. He gets out at night and walks around. Here you have this is a storyboard that I created a little while ago on things that I like. I recently went to an exhibit just before lockdown in at the Whitney Museum, and it was an exhibit called The Craft in Art, and it follows from the 1950s to present day, I believe. I might be wrong with that date, but it highlights people who use craft in their art. Here I have, pinned here is a piece by Elaine Rychek, who uses the sort of handwriting of the sampler, but she's using it as a sort of way to I've lost my train of thought there. Political. Yes, it's political art, and it really resonated with me because I've always collected cross-stitching and vintage textiles from all my perusing at flea markets and antique markets that I love to do, and almost bordering on a hoarderish. So here, I thought you were going to ask me questions. Here are some of the things that I have hoarded and found from flea markets. Little cross-stitch pieces. This looks like it's a piece that's a craft piece. Are there any questions, by the way?
And these inspire you how?
These inspire me because what I love about the cross stitch is they're traditionally, back in the 19th century, they were samplers for little girls that was all they had to learn when they were in school, because that was what little girls learned back in the day. And then later on, it became more of a hobby. And just to go back a minute to that piece of political art, the sort of female artists who used that sort of handwriting to sort of have their voices heard, it's sort of, I find it really inspiring. You know, and a lot of the motifs that they also use, I also find very inspiring. There you can see a little cross-stitch design that I've done. I think will be available soon on the website, but it's not quite ready yet.
And your logo, right?
Yes, and my logo is done in cross-stitch, as you can see. There's something very, when I'm designing with the cross-stitch, I use a pen and I draw on it, on the graph paper, and there's something very sort of satisfactory and cathartic when you're doing that. You sort of get into the space. So here are a few more things that I've sort of hoarded or found and purchased at flea markets. I do find a lot of vintage linens and tablecloths very inspiring too, because again they are sort of almost a branch of that sampler, where these are a lot back in the day. A lot of the time these were all homemade. You didn't really purchase things, and so they were very individualistic to that specific person or household. that answer that first question? I feel like I rambled on a bit.
Yeah, you did.
I did, okay.
There's a question from Helen asking about this jacket and how that relates to your inspiration.
Oh, hi, Helen. One of the other inspiration things I find very inspiring are the pearly kings and queens of London. You can walk this way, and I'll show you a storyboard that I've done. These are the pearly kings and queens of London. They are, again, it started in the Victorian era by the name a street sweeper whose name escapes me right now. But then it became that each borough had their own pearly king and queen who collected money. They were a charity organization. So each different borough of London would have their own, and once a year they would come out and parade, if I'm not mistaken. If you go to my website, I have a blog, and I talk about it a little bit more in my website again. So back to your question, Helen. So that's how that was inspired. So it's actually not really anything to do with the table linens. I'm sort of inspired by lots of different things, but currently, well, always, but especially currently, I'm very inspired by things that are sort of homemade and handmade, and maybe it's something to do with the pandemic and being locked down. Here is a piece of textiles, and I think it's European in origin, and it's got cut work and chain stitch on top of a mesh, and I really, really love it, and I actually have not had a chance to use that inspiration yet, but it will be hopefully soon to come. Here's a little pocketbook from the 20s that has lovely little bits of beading on. Again, it's very destroyed, and what I love is that a lot of these things most people would discard because, you know, you think it's no longer of any use, but for me, I feel like I'm able to give it a second life by recreating or doing a version of it onto something that is newer and a little bit more modern. Here is a little bit more beading. This is a velvet dress from the 20s. I think it's what's left of the little velvet dress from the 20s.
So you kind of combine things, right?
Yes. So I would maybe use an element of this dress and an element of maybe this tablecloth and an element of the pearly kings and queens, and then the bannering is something I'm inspired by from tattoos, and the piglet is actually, I just have a bit of an obsession with baby piglets, and I love them, and it's actually Babe from the movie Babe. You can see also I use some of these sort of tattoo motifs to I've made some pillows. The pillows are not upcycled, they're made from new materials, because I did try working with dead stock linen, and there are some really beautiful vintage linens from France, but it proved to be price prohibitive. And also you don't want to ruin a lovely antique sort of French linen. So some of the other pieces of work here I'd like to show you is, this is it's not quite one of a kind. There are about 3 of them, but one of them belongs to me already. This is made from a technique that is sort of a rug hooking technique.
Chad says he loves that movie.
Who?
Chad.
Oh, I might have to watch it again tonight. But this is I found this antique tapestry, really unusual tapestry technique from the Victorian era, and this one is done sort of as if it's like a hooked rug sort of tufting technique. And I've just recently realized on Instagram, one of the things that I follow now is called tufting gun, and I'm a bit obsessed with it. There's now a modern gun that's hooked up to a power point and an air compressor, and you can do this sort of tufting in minutes. But this is done by hand. All of my work is designed here in my studio in Cripplebush, but the execution is done by artisans in India. So everything you see is done by hand, or sometimes on the machine. It's called hand-guided machine, where they draw the pattern freehand onto the garment, and then they use the machine and they move they guide the machine onto a pattern.
So there's a question from Erin, and she's asking, do you look for vintage pieces knowing what you want to add to them, or to find pieces and then let the inspiration strike, or a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. There are times when I think there are things that are a bit more ubiquitous that I know that I want and I need to find, so such as sweatshirts. But then sometimes I'll stumble across things and I'll find it and I think, oh, that's an amazing piece and I need to do something with that to work with it. And then sometimes I'll find something really amazing and think it's so amazing I can't put anything on it. It needs to just stay the way it is. So it sort of goes in those three directions, and it's a sort of a balance of the three quite often. I'm not going to show it, but in the back of the storage area is where all the stuff that I love and I'm not going to embroider over, but I just want to hoard and keep. Sometimes also you'll see pieces that you that is sort of torn or ruined, and you, in the process of repairing and mending it, you end up decorating it. So here is another piece that has that tufting technique in a more geometric pattern. This is a Levi's denim jacket that is a big E jacket, and I know what a lot of people collect that. This is like a much more collectible jacket, and actually, to be honest, I didn't mean to put it on the big E jacket because it's one of those things that people just want on their own and plain, but it sort of fell into the pan and ended up getting embroidered by mistake. But I love it, and it's the one of a kind. Here is another pearly jacket on a trucker. It's a pearly trucker. This one is much lighter on a sort of very faded 80s oversized jacket. It is a Levi's, I believe. And then this is a one-of-a-kind piece. It's a little polka dot blouse from the 60s, I think. It's a cotton poly blouse. And I've put these little fringes of cherries, and it's somehow transformed into a sort of almost country western feeling.
So where did the cherries come from?
The cherries came from a little, I think it was a little girl's vintage dress that I found that I picked up again at a flea market, but I thought it was a really sweet little sort of cherry pattern. And then I just love fringes, so I added fringe to it. As Diana Reeland would say, fringe, where is fringe today? I miss fringe. Here is a 1970s
windbreaker.
Is it a windbreaker? It's sort of shorter. Windbreakers are longer, aren't they? I'm at a loss for words today.
Shell jacket.
Anyway, it's one of a kind. It has sequins and metal work on it. And metal work, if you can zoom closely, it looks like it is made of metal, and it's a very, very fine spring. You probably cannot even tell that it's a spring from the look of it, but it's about the size or width of a bugle bead, and then they cut it and they and apply it to a garment with needle and thread.
Another message from Erin. What are some of your favorite flea markets?
My absolute favorite market to go to is Brimfield, obviously, which hasn't happened at all this year.
Where is Brimfield?
Brimfield is in Massachusetts. It's a town called Brimfield in Massachusetts, in the middle of nowhere. And three times a year, it becomes a town full of flea markets. All these different fields open up at different times of the week, for the whole week. And actually, the day before Brimfield starts on the Monday, Brimfield always starts on a Tuesday and ends on a Sunday. The day before Brimfield starts in Sturbridge, the next town, there's an antique textile show, which I always go to because I find sort of vintage, antique utilitarian wear, all sorts of things, sometimes antique embroideries. This piece is a sort of nylon raincoat. I think it's army surplus, and it has these moose on it. And that are kissing, gay moose. And I put these metalwork stars all over it because I, as you can probably tell from my work, I sort of am a bit obsessed with stars and the night sky. So these are mooses kissing under the night sky in the fall.
And then are they leaves?
And those are leaves, yes.
And what's on the back?
The back is quite simple, just a few gold stars and a few leaves.
Ariana messaged and said your work is so beautiful. She's having trouble shopping the collection with the link.
Oh.
Brad, we're going to update that later. So sorry about that.
There's a problem with the link. Oops. I had a little problem this morning actually with some pictures weren't showing up. But I think they're fixing it. This is another. This is a vintage or used aviator army surplus bag, and I love these because of how old and beaten up they are. And this one has been embroidered with a parrot, the same as the one on the jacket, but a single one. And this is a red parrot, obviously. And then I've also done these sort of stars, like tufting stars. And there are some glass beads and a few more stars on the side. It's huge. You could probably use this to go on vacation. You could fit a small child in there.
If you were so inclined.
This is this garment just posted on Field and Supply today, and this one is army surplus. I believe it's Dutch, and it's super extra oversized. And I think a lot of these are large. Sometimes you get the larger sizes because the normal sizes are all bought up, but I sort of kind of love the extra large size of this. So the front is rather boring. I know it's just got stars on the shoulder, and then the back is where all the action is. This is embroidery, and it's hand embroidered, so it's not machine in this particular case. Each one is done with a needle and thread.
What was the inspiration for this one?
I was just getting to this. This is came from a vintage kimono. So I found some really wrecked, ruined kimonos that, the silk is completely shattered, and but the embroidery was relatively intact. So there was enough there for me to sort of get inspired and use some of it to trace off and also to give to the artisans to look at in the way that the stitches are put on.
There's a question from...
There's also a little rocket on the shoulder.
Oh, there is a little rocket there. Yeah.
Because, I like to have a twist in everything.
There's a question from Faith. You seem to gravitate towards animals. What animal inspires your work the most?
What animal inspires my... Well, it's the Babe the Piglet is it's up there. But I have quite a lot of birds in my work quite often. Although it seems quite thin on the ground at the moment, but I do like birds a lot, quite often. Sometimes when I'm looking out my studio window, there is a heron that's by the pond. If you look over there, you can see there's a blue heron. Sometimes it just sort of hangs out there looking for fish. This is the same design on a snow camo parka in black and white. So I just made everything black here, including the caviar beads, the thread obviously, and also the rocket. Any more questions?
Yeah, there's a question from Jen, our neighbor. Hey Jen, what is your favorite piece out of all of these?
My favorite piece out of all of this has got to be this. It's also the most expensive piece. The parrots.
Easy one.
Or some people, as they say, everyone loves a cockatoo. What are you laughing at? Here's okay, and then I did one in the army green colorway. So these are the ones. I think Erin was asking, how do you decide on what to choose? And I did these. One of the things that that is to do with upcycling is that you have to use what's there and what's available. And so when you go to some of these bulk vintage places, there are a lot of sweatshirts, there are a lot of t-shirts, sports, athletic sort of jerseys, and army surplus to a certain extent. But in order to make these things sort of at a more sort of affordable price, because these things are hand done and they're shipped around quite a lot of places, I find these sort of utilitarian or ubiquitous pieces, and this one is a little cheeky take on a slogan. That is also done in the cross stitch, which I love because it sort of has the voice of that 13-year-old who's sampling.
There's a question from Helen. Have you ever visited the artisans in India?
I have. It's in Delhi. I go there. I try and go once every year or once every 2 years. And the pandemic unfortunately coincided with my trip, so I haven't actually been for a couple of years now. But it's very important to go and visit them because you need to just be sure that the people you're partnering with are, and the people I partner with are treating their workers fairly, and they are, giving them a fair living wage, which is something that I care about very much. This is a patchwork done in the sort of lightning flash pattern with the fringe, and the patchwork is made from reclaimed 1930s sackcloth. Then there are a few other colorways of the same thing, and these are, I think I only made 4 of these right now, so there's 1 in each color, and that's it. But sometimes what I also do is, if somebody wants something really badly, I'll make them one specially. So I do make to order as long as you're willing to wait for it, because it takes a long time. Not so much to make it, but in order for me to save on shipping and sort of try and minimize my carbon footprint, I send everything in bulk, because of things are shipped by air, but I send everything in a large box so I fit as much in as I possibly can. This doesn't need any explanation. It's sort of, I made this up based on a bunch of different tattoo ideas that I had seen. Okay. And again, this one, you saw it, I think, on a pillow earlier, and I have it in a few different colorways again. Here's another of the fringy ones. And these are a bunch of denim truckers that I put the same embroidery on, and this is also done by hand. This is from a rescued Victorian piano shawl, and I've had them redesign and place the embroidery onto the jacket in the layout that I'd arranged. Also, I changed the yarn a little bit. I wanted this to be in a more cotton matte yarn. And so these are there are a limited of 6 edition, but they're all different. Like this one has a lot of heavy mending on the collar, you can see. Also some heavy mending of holes on the sleeves. Looks like they've been shot there. This one, the collar was beyond mending, so I just cut it off, but I think it's kind of nice without the collar. And frayed it. And that's everything I have here, but I can go on to this little, there's one here that's not on the rack. And I love quilts and quilting as well. And again, it's back to that sort of homemade and hand-spun hallmarks work. This is a sort of pretty generic type of quilting, and I've applied it onto the garment, and I've used a sort of herringbone and different sort of hand stitches to apply them to. Again, these are all reclaimed vintage quilt blocks. So these are actually unfinished quilts. When I go to a lot of flea markets, quite often you'll find vintage quilts, which I love, but then often you'll find little piles of half-made quilts where blocks have just been put together and not been finished, and those are ideal for what I want to do with these. So that's the sweatshirts. These are all the sweatshirts that I'm just launching.
You do love vintage varsity as well, right?
I do love vintage varsity too. Let me see if I have anything here to show you. This is not vintage varsity at all, and this is not anything to do with my work. I'm digressing, but this is an incredible Victorian blouse with this. I don't even know what to call the work, but it's sort of like a heavily sort of chain stitch yarn that is then hand applied onto the garment as a sort of raised embroidery form. So my the falls is my brand arose out of what I do, which is my other job is I design embellishments and I sell it to one-of-a-kind embellishments, and I sell it to other designers. So I'm a sort of an embroidery studio artist in a way. And out of that, I started making things to wear, and then out of that, I got requests for people to make them, and that's how the falls came about. So this is a I feel like it's a 1940s or 50s sort of silk lace blouse, Chinese or made in Hong Kong. All the lace here is hand tattered. I'm not sure the exact terminology for it is. And I have gone and gilded the lily and added lots of these sort of nude colored and gold colored glass fringes.
So this is your work in progress rack, right?
This is my work in progress rack. There is actually a jacket here that I'm waiting for Anna, who wants to do, who wants one of the cockatoo jackets, but the red version. So I've got a new one coming out soon. Are there any more questions? Oh. This is one of my favorite pieces too. So I also like to work on sportswear, because back to what I was saying earlier about finding things that are easily available. There is a lot of sportswear that is being thrown out when you go to these places, and I pick through them and I find the ones that I feel like I like and would work for what I do. In this case, these were not inspired by any antique textiles. It sort of came straight out of my head, of sort of shooting stars done with bugle beads, and again the spring metal work.
So there's a question from Alison. When you're buying these, do you have a vision of what you're going to create, or does it come to you at once? And another question from Helen, which is, how did you get into fashion? Did you fall in?
Alison, when I find something, it happens both ways. Sometimes I look at something and I think I need to this is amazing, and I want to put stars all over it or whatever. And sometimes it's the other way around. I have an idea of what I want to do, and I go and find something, and I have to go and find a thing to do it onto. And what was Helen's question?
How did you fall into fashion?
How did I fall into fashion? Well, it's really cheesy.
You got 2 minutes.
Okay, it's a really cheesy answer, but when I was a kid, I always wanted to do art, and when I went to school in the UK, they had an amazing art department, and so from there I sort of discovered fashion through literally just fashion magazines lying around, and thinking and starting to make clothes in the art department, and that's how I fell into fashion. And I went to a college in London called Central St Martin's to do my foundation, and then later to do my master's. And funnily enough, I did my degree in a place called Kingston in London, and now I'm right next to Kingston in New York. Do we still have time? Do you want to see more things? Oh, can we show you the cushions, even though they're not upcycled? So some of these, I actually have another cushion that just got sold just now. Someone came into my studio and I sold it. And so I have a pair of these. One has got my friend's dog, Dora. And Dora's a lovely dog. And this is a portrait of her. And I feel like it's... So
it's be nice or leave, right?
Yes. I feel like that's what she's thinking when you go into the house and see her. Then the other one is Vito the cat, which is not here because I sold Vito.
How about these?
Oh yes, here. This is inspired by vintage tapestries.
And then
Pregnant pause.
It's 3 o'clock.
Oh, is it 3 o'clock? Is it time? These are prototypes that never actually made it to the thing, but this is an actual. So that's a prototype, and this is the final product. I felt like it needed to be in a softer color rather than in a strong black color. so you sort of have to work a little bit harder to read it. That's all I think we have time for. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope go buy something.